Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 13 of the Qualiverse. Today, we are going to be talking about quality assured service, the brown cow of the AV industry. I'm Jim Maltese, and thank you very much for joining us. How many of you like root beer? And how many of you like milk? Pretty easy, right? But how many of you have had the deliciousness that is root beer mixed with milk in a 1-to-1 ratio, otherwise known as the brown cow? And I know what you're thinking. Jim, why? Why would anyone want to combine these things? They're fine. They're fine as separate entities, but mixing them together makes me feel a little funny and icky inside. Listen, brown cows were a delicacy while I was growing up. Before you think I'm crazy, or more crazy than you already do, it's just a poor man's or a rushed parent's root beer float. Just replace ice cream with milk and bam, you got it. The flavors are there. These two things that are typically enjoyed separately may, in fact, be better together. And not too many people drink brown cows, but if you think about it, it just makes sense. And the same can be said for AV customer support services and quality. We spend a lot of time focusing on applying quality ideals to design and installation, and we should continue to do so, of course, for sure. But what about service? Does quality assurance belong in the service world? And I would say wholeheartedly yes. The whole point of quality assurance is to provide users with complete systems that perform as expected, and to do this consistently from any member in the team, right? That's a key part of it. And to me, this has service written all over it. It's easy to see how powerful this would be for preventive maintenance or health checkup visits. The idea of creating functional checklists and system performance checklists for a scheduled visit to the system makes perfect sense. But using these checklists, we can assure that the system is indeed ready for business, and any service specialist that performs the visit will follow the same process, so we can confirm the system is complete and performs well. Additionally, by leveraging a checklist, I can send Tom, Jenny, or Paul to run through the system and end up with the same consistent result, the same end game. The functional checklist will assure that every function of the system is exercised, even the functions that are not obvious. And there may be a lot, like what happens if we need to dim the lights when a call is connected, or how should the LEDs on microphones work when a conference privacy is selected. These things aren't intuitive from the user interface, but they're still functions of the system. Without a checklist, without something documented that rips through all of these functions, how is someone servicing that, or how is someone performing a preventive maintenance visit supposed to know this is how the system is supposed to work? We need that functional checklist. And the system performance checklist, the complement of that functional checklist, will assure that the system is healthy and all devices are performing within specifications. Both these checklists will confirm that the system is 100%, and if performed on a periodic basis, like a preventive maintenance program, ideally, this program will catch issues before the users do. And that's the whole goal of preventive maintenance, right? We want to stay ahead of the users. If a user uncovers something, now we've got a fire drill, and now we've got to run around like a chicken with our head cut off. If we have this periodic testing of the system, that quality assurance aspect of it, ideally we catch it and address it before the user even notices anything is wrong. So since the systems we're testing, once we get into the customer support, since the systems we are testing are already in production, we don't necessarily have to get as granular and nitty-gritty as we do during a full commissioning of a system before it's turned over to the users. Using expensive test equipment to assure it's been installed correctly would only be required during that initial installation. Once the system is in use, we can focus more on that human experience, the experience in the room, and that is what the test equipment is used to measure. But once a room is put in production, now we can just focus on that experience for reasons I'll get to in a second. So an example, instead of measuring a signal-to-noise ratio of the system with an expensive but awesome NTI-XL2 audio analyzer, the service specialist can just make sure they don't hear a hiss when no audio is present in the system. the human experience. That's what signal to noise is assuring no one does. We don't want to hear any hiss when there's no audio. Another example, instead of measuring the impedance on a loudspeaker line with an expensive, but again awesome, NTIMR Pro impedance meter, the service specialist can just assure that the amplifiers are functioning properly, right, that they're protected, and that all loudspeakers are distributing sound at the same level, that they're tapped appropriately. So these tests are, it's not as objective as measuring these performance specifications with that expensive and fairly complex test equipment. But with a little bit of training, if we have trained eyes and ears, this subjective testing focused on the human experience can be still very effective at making sure the system is 100%. Additionally, the training required to perform this minimal test equipment commissioning light checklist is about an hour. That's all you need for training to get up and running to do this commissioning light checklist versus the 24 plus hours of training required for the CQT certification, not to mention the 2+ years of experience as a technician in the AV industry. It's a much smaller lift. And this is the reasoning behind the AQAV readiness or RED checklist in the AV9000 standard. It provides a checklist that someone with very little experience can complete to confirm the functionality and performance of an AV system that is already in production. If we perform these tests periodically throughout the system's life, the potential for a surprise failure during a meeting, and of course you know the surprise failure is going to come at the most critical meeting of the year. That always seems to be the case, but the potential for a surprise failure is dramatically decreased. So, for preventive maintenance visits and health checks, quality and service seem to be a perfect match. To me, it's a no-brainer. But what about for break-fix service visits, where we kind of just want to get in and get out? Let's say the user notices a laptop input no longer functions or a touch panel has stopped responding. So a service specialist goes in, they're assigned to the case, and they find the issue within an hour. Great. Now, should they continue on with a complete functional and performance check of the system? I'd say yes. Some might say no, because we typically want to limit the service call time and get the room back into production as quickly as possible. Or, what if it's a billable service call? As soon as the issue is addressed, most owners of that technology would want to limit the service hours to a minimum to, keep the bill as small as possible. But the question is, what's at risk here? If the service specialist leaves and there's another, could be unrelated issue that pops up in the room within, let's say, like 3 months, users will automatically assume it was something the service specialist messed up during their last visit. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter. The perception of the service provider and the technology itself is tarnished either way. Also, if the goal is to make sure the system stays up and running and the service specialist is there, why not take advantage of the situation and spend an extra 20 to 30 minutes, and that's what it takes for a typical conference room, just 20 or 30 minutes, to make sure the system is indeed 100%. These are systems that have been in use for some time, so spend a little bit of extra time just to make sure it is complete, it's 100%. From the user perspective, I think it's a valuable offer. Hey, while I'm here, let me just make sure everything is perfect for you, the user. From the service provider perspective, I think it's also a valuable offer. Let me do this to protect my reputation and make sure I don't have to come back here again in a week. Yes, it's a little bit of extra time, but I think it's well worth it. And it's definitely great for the system and the users, but let's not forget the consistency aspect of it. More often than not, a service specialist might not have ever seen the system before a case or ticket is opened. Imagine if they had a documented function list to use during their visit to make sure they are able to quickly check everything is operating as expected. Additionally, what if the owner's executive support team, so not the service provider, but the technology owner, what if their support team is tasked with making sure the boardroom is ready for a director's meeting? How comforting would it be to have that functional checklist ready for use to verify they've exercised every single function of the system? Maybe they haven't been in there in a couple of months. Maybe they forget. Maybe it's a rough day. If they have that checklist, it's much easier to verify every function, and it's documented so they can rest assured they did it. It's the power of a checklist, right? Anyone with the functional checklist, the readiness checklist, that's that performance checklist, and maybe some experience with the system itself, is able to effectively verify that the system is good to go. And I'm also not preaching some never before thought of idea. I mean, think about the last time you took your car in for service, either planned for like an oil change or brake fix. So there's this funny sound when I press the brake. The mechanic most likely won't just attack that singular issue. They will probably run through their documented, award-winning 57-point inspection checklist to make sure everything in the car is working well, for the same reasons we just talked about. Assuring the car is 100%, that it won't need service again within like a week, and to keep the driver and or users happy. Servicing complex systems demand quality management systems be in place to do it well and consistently. Now, unfortunately, in our industry, not many people think about pairing service and quality. Quality management stays in the design and installation realm. Service attacks singular aspects of a system during a break fix call, and that's about it. It's the AV equivalent of not seeing the forest for the trees. Putting the two together could improve the way we deliver customer support services to our users. Sure, it'll take a little extra time, but the cost of poor quality is always higher than making sure it's done right that first time. And it's a beautiful thing when we mix in some quality assurance with our service offerings. Just like root beer and milk. Like I said, they're fine on their own, but when you mix them, something magical happens. And I encourage you to try it, both the service and quality and root beer with milk, because then, and only then, will I be able to ask, how now, brown cow? And is your service more pow or full? I tried. I don't know. It was a whole thing. But that's what I have. Thank you very much for joining us. Please click that subscribe button, and I will see you on the next episode of the Qualiverse. Have an AV day.